It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, John Hagel. Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, great. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So, you've been a busy guy. 40 years in Silicon Valley, management consulting, entrepreneur, speaker, author. You've written 7 books, is that correct?
I just published my 8th book.
So, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, great. Looking at your bio, there's 2 words that are jumping off the page at me that I think I just want to hit on those particular 2 words, and then we can see where that takes us, all right?
Sure.
The first word is narratives. Now, we hear that term thrown around with the news media a lot, and particularly politically charged about, the liberal narrative, the conservative narrative. Everybody has a narrative. And if they don't publish a particular piece, it's because it didn't follow their narrative. I hear that all the time. So,
sure.
What are you referring to with narrative?
Yeah, I have a very different definition of narrative than most people. For most people, it's narrative and story mean the same thing. They're synonymous. And I make a big distinction between stories, which I view as self-contained. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end to them. The end, it's over. And the story is about the storyteller, or it's about some other people, real or imagined. It's not about you. You can use your imagination, figure out what you would have done, but it's not about you. In contrast, for me, a narrative is future looking. It is not yet resolved. There is some kind of big threat or opportunity in the future, not clear whether it's going to be achieved or not. And the resolution of the narrative hinges on you. It's a call to action to the audience to say your choices, your actions are going to help determine how this narrative resolves. And so I think in the context of the political environment we're in, again, people use narratives to mean very different things. But the key for me is I think both sides of the political spectrum have fallen on what I call threat-based narratives. It's all about the enemy's coming to get us. We're all going to die. We need to mobilize now and resist. It's all about a threat in the future. And I see very few, if any, political people who are articulating what I call an opportunity-based narrative. What amazing things could we accomplish if we all came together, if we all resolved our differences and came together? And to me, that's what's missing. And I think that the threat-based narratives, unfortunately, feed fear, the emotion of fear. If you're confronting a threat, your natural human tendency is to be afraid.
Well, that's true.
Unfortunately, I think, I think fear leads to some pretty negative outcomes. So anyway.
Well, I think that's where we're at as a society, is fear. And on either side of the aisle, the narrative is not a unity narrative. It's a unity narrative with a condition. Okay, well, we'll unify if you come to our side and believe what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that's
polarizing, right?
It's polarizing. That's no help.
Problem.
That's no help, because the basic foundation of the United States and a democracy generally is the fact that people have the right to disagree. We all live together under one flag, one government, but we have the right to different political views. We have a right to different social views. And as long as we don't kill each other over those, then we should be able to live together in some form of unity. But right now, I'm not seeing the unity narrative from either side.
That's the problem. And it's the focus of my new book, because I believe that it's feeding the fear and fear is a very limiting emotion, and what we desperately need are more what I describe as opportunity-based narratives that really inspire people and motivate them to move beyond the fear and come together.
Well, let's transition over to your book. So your book is called
The Journey Beyond Fear.
Oh, Beyond. Okay, Journey Beyond the Fear. So what's the journey? Can you give us a synopsis of it?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to assert that there is the potential for journey beyond fear, that we can, in fact, move beyond the fear, and that we need to. I believe in a world that's rapidly changing. If we live in fear, we're going to be in more and more dire circumstances. And so the whole thrust of the book is how do we move beyond fear? And I focus on what I call three pillars that can help us on that journey. One is this concept of narrative, and specifically opportunity-based narratives. And then I think there's a second pillar, which is around the notion of passion, a very specific form of passion that I call the passion of the explorer, that can provide us with the energy and fuel to move beyond fear. And then a third pillar is a very specific new kind of platform that I call learning platforms that can help us come together and really achieve much greater impact together than we ever could on our own. So it's I'm an optimist by nature, and I believe we all have this opportunity. And my hope with the book is to be a catalyst to help people, first of all, realize that there is a journey that can be made, but then to make the journey.
Well, fear is something that I think most people are held back by in this life. I know certainly for me it was for a long time. And it wasn't the fear of death. It wasn't the fear of being inadequate to someone else. It was the fear of just self-confidence. That was my fear. Lack of self-confidence. Fear that I'm going to fall on my face, or fear I'm going to make a fool of myself. And I think that lack of self-confidence fear is something that holds lots and lots of people back in their life from fulfilling what they really want to do. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I think more and more. I mean, some people inherently from childhood have had that lack of self-confidence, but I think we're in a world where there's mounting performance pressure on all of us. Competition is intensifying on a global scale. We've got accelerating pace of change. Things are changing. When things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And then you've got extreme events that come in out of nowhere to disrupt us. That leads to diminishing self-confidence, right? Even if you thought you were able to thrive in this world, you're less and less convinced of it as these changes accelerate and pressure mounts.
How much of the accelerated fear that we are all feeling in our society now is due to the technological boom, and that technology is changing so quick that many of us just simply can't keep up with it?
No, I think that's a key contributor. I've spent decades doing research on this based in Silicon Valley. That's been a natural focus of mine. But I think that, there have been historical studies done of major other technology breakthroughs, things like electricity and, a whole range of technologies over time. But all of those, you had a major breakthrough and then things stabilized and you had modest incremental improvement over time. With digital technology, we are continuing to have exponential improvement in the technology. So that is accelerating the pace of change in a way that has never been seen before. And so I think it's definitely a contributor, and it's providing connectivity on a global scale that on the one side has benefits. Obviously, we can connect with people and things around the world. But on the other side, it has the challenge of, because of that connectivity, a small event somewhere in a faraway place in the world quickly cascades into an extreme event. And, dare I mention the pandemic, but it just creates that tendency to really escalate things very quickly.
Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking about what you said, where digital technology is creating this rapid change exponentially without really stopping at this point. when if you look historically at, say, the early 1900s, from the 1800s, turn of the century into the 20th century, it's sort of electricity, automobiles, telephones, and airplanes all kind of came at about the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there was about a 50-year period where we didn't really have too much of anything. They improved on what they established. Better cars, better airplanes, better telephones, safer electricity so people weren't being electrocuted every time they switched on a lamp. And then I think the next major, and you could disagree with this, but maybe the next major technological leap was the atomic bomb in the 40s. I don't know. I mean, that's debatable because, I mean, obviously it was bad for Japan, but it did sort of change the scope of how people are going to fight in wars. Because as long as you've got the bomb, it was almost a deterrent in that sense. And then, things were kind of calm for a while until the digital revolution, really. I mean, I grew up I was a child in the 60s. I was a teenager in the 70s. And through the 60s, 70s, 80s, nothing happened except MTV. And then the computer hit, and then boom. And it's been free fall ever since then. You just look at from 1995 how much has changed with smartphones and with social media. That didn't exist until the early 2000s probably, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, extraordinary benefit that accrues from all this technology. I mean, I keep asking people if they can remember back when they couldn't use a search engine to get an answer to a question. God knows that was so huge benefit at one level. But again, I think it creates more and more pressure. One of the forms of pressure that I think is generating fear in people today is this whole question of how quickly is my job going to be replaced by a robot or by some computer? And, that's generating a lot of fear. And it's understandable at one level, I think, but at another level, it's something we need to face and overcome.
Well, although that's not necessarily a new fear, because certainly the people at the turn of the century into the 20th century, the automobile pretty much put blacksmiths out of business.
Yes. The interesting change here is virtually every job, whether it's manual labor or, thought processes, can be replaced by technology. I mean, there's a risk. I mean, I don't believe it's actually going to happen that way, but I think the way we define work today, most of the work that is being done by humans today can be replaced by technology.
Well, that's very true. It's funny. I was just having this conversation with somebody else about how technology is replacing the creative artist and how much technology is infused in the music that we listen to these days, to the point where there's very little human interaction in some of these recordings. It's just completely done by computer. The vocals, the music, the drums, everything, right? And so that's interesting. I want to hit on one of your talking points, and then we kind of have to wrap this up. It says how to find your own passion in life, whether you're in your 20s or your 60s.
Yes.
So what is your reply to that?
Well, the first thing is to look for the passion. I think one of the challenges is that we live in a society, and I'm going to generalize again, but in our society, our families, our schools, the message is forget about your passion. Find work that is financially rewarding and can lead to financial success, and that's going to be the key to success. Forget about passion. Passion's a distraction. My belief in a world that's, again, under more and more pressure and rapidly changing is if we don't have passion, and again, a very specific form of passion, we're never going to learn as quickly as we need to in order to be successful in whatever we're pursuing. So if we don't have that passion, good luck. And to the question of how to find the passion, I mean, I had 2 daughters, and my only message to them as young people was keep looking, search, see what really excites you, and don't stop until you find something that really excites you, and then find a way to make a living from it. And if you're older, I believe, again, we have the potential to unlock that passion at any age. If we're older, it's more of a process of reflection, of looking back and saying, what are the experiences that I've had over my life that really excited me? And is there a common theme to those experiences? Are they just isolated things, or is there something that brings them all together? And also reflect on the people you admire the most. Who really excites you and do you admire the most? And maybe that's where their passion is what they're doing is what excites your passion. So I think, again, that my belief and experience, I've done research on this, is that we can unlock this passion at any point in our lives. So we just have to, again, want to find it, first of all, and then make the effort to find it.
Okay. Well, I think that's very interesting. And I'm going to use myself as a personal example of this. I knew what my passion was when I was about 4 years old, and it has not changed. And I'll be 60 years old next year. Okay.
Okay.
My problem has been trying to make a living at it because it has been virtually impossible, and things throw technology into the mix. Technology completely turned the industry upside down. And on the one hand, it's good. On the one hand, it's bad. It's turned it into a double-edged sword. But the old line that I keep hearing from a lot of musicians, singers, songwriters, entertainers, people in the entertainment industry, I'm just going to use that generally speaking, because I have fingers in all the pies in the music and entertainment industry generally. But the line that I keep hearing from a lot of people, they say, it's amazing how successful one can be in the entertainment industry and make absolutely no money. Yeah. And it's true. Yeah. It's true. I have friends of mine who have, nowadays, success seems to be measured on how many followers you have on Facebook and YouTube, okay? So I have friends who have hundreds of thousands of followers and views, all kinds of stuff they put up. And they can't make a living at that, because YouTube pays like a quarter of a penny for a view, or there's no way you're going to make money on the ad revenue unless you're in the top tier of the half of the 1% who are getting hundreds of millions of views. There's a big gap between there. But the starving artist is not anything new. That's been around for centuries, okay? So if somebody's passion is that, and they find it impossible to make a living, most of us have to do something else to make money. So I was kind of curious that you said, find something to make money, because it leads me to the idea that money will buy you happiness, which may or may not be true.
No, I'm not saying money buys you happiness. Money gives you the freedom to pursue your happiness.
That's true.
I mean, again, if you're not making any money, you're not going to be able to pursue your passion, so you're not going to be happy.
Right.
So again, I think it's a question of just really finding a way to make a living in some way related to your passion.
Right, which is not always that easy. They don't always go hand in hand, because
I don't want to imply that this is easy.
I know plenty of great entertainment artists that are also waiters, and bartenders and salesmen and whatever, taxi drivers.
Right.
So it's nice when they come together. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. But it's okay. Let's do one more, and then we can wrap it up.
Well, we can talk a bit about the third pillar that I mentioned, the learning platforms that I think are going to be key in the journey beyond fear. And again, everybody talks about platforms today. It's, can't avoid platforms, but most of the platforms today support short-term transactions like buying and selling products, retail platforms, or social platforms where you can connect with friends and acquaintances and maintain relationships with them. I'm talking about a different kind of platform that is yet to be really developed, but I believe essential to making this journey beyond fear, is what if we created platforms where the primary design goal of the platform was to help all the participants on the platform learn faster together? And I should say, when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about learning in the form of listening to video lectures or workshops. We have a lot of that kind of platform out there. That's sharing existing knowledge. But in a world that's rapidly changing, the most powerful and necessary form of learning is learning in the form of creating new knowledge. And we can only do that through action and acting together with others. And to me, that's what's missing, is platforms that help us to come together, starting in small groups. I'm a big proponent that you start with small groups, but then connect those groups into broader networks so they can learn from each other. That's missing.
Can you give me one example of a group effort to find new knowledge? Where would you start? What are we looking for?
It occurs in so many different domains. I spent a lot of time doing research in extreme sports. And, one of my favorite is big wave surfing. Everybody views big wave surfing as a solo sport, right? You only have one surfer on a surfboard, and that's it. Well, it turns out the big wave surfers, the ones who have this passion of the explorer, they are connecting in small groups with each other on the beach, where they share that passion for riding bigger and bigger waves, and they're constantly challenging each other and supporting each other. They've built deep trust-based relationships with each other because they all have that commitment to getting to higher and higher levels of performance. And they learn a lot faster together than they ever could if they just sat there, one-on-one going out on their surfboard. So I think it's a lesson to be learned that no matter how smart or talented you are, you're going to learn a lot faster if you have a small group of other people who share that passion. And again, it's a combination of supporting each other, when you're running into challenges and frustration, but also challenging each other when you're not working hard enough or have enough aspiration, challenging you to how can you get to even higher levels of performance.
Well, I think that's a great example with the surfers. And it also kind of reminds me of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that I've had on the show, who have repeated a similar line where they've talked about their rise to success. And they said one of the things that they discovered on their road to wealth and riches was that they needed to surround themselves with people who were actually smarter than them and to learn off of those people. He said, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Yes. No, absolutely. And I think that, again, certainly in Silicon Valley here, one of the things that I think has contributed to the success is they have what I call a connecting disposition. They're wanting to connect with each other and form these small groups, entrepreneurial groups, to pursue their passion. And they learn a lot faster than if they were just trying to do it all by themselves.
Yeah, you bang your head against the wall when you try to do it yourself. I mean, even this show that I started 6 years ago, which is an outshoot of my music productions, has gotten to the point where I had to start hiring people to do work because there was just getting too much. Getting, too many bookings, the editing needed to be done, the PR, which is probably the central part of any podcast that gets successful. And,
Sure.
there's no way I could do it myself. So, we're up to, we have one full-time person and 2 part-time contract people. And the funniest thing about it is, though, it hasn't made my job any easier or any less time to complete it. I still work 16 hours a day, even with these people all helping. I'm just doing other things, but it's all related to that.
A lot more.
Yeah. Actually.
No, and I will say, too, that one of the reasons I'm so concerned about the growing amount of fear is fear tends to isolate people. They tend to lose trust in each other. And so they want to just do it all themselves because they can't trust or don't want to rely on anyone else.
Yeah, that's a good
so
point.
that limits their ability to learn faster and have more and more impact. And you get into this vicious cycle of the less impact they have, the more fear they have, and the more isolated they become. It's not a healthy outcome at all.
Well, we've got a long way to go as a society and as a human race, and maybe people should pick up your book and read it, and that'll be the first step to advancing to a better place.
I talked about mounting performance pressure. At the same time, we're in a world of exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than ever before. But in order to do that, we have to see the opportunity and pursue it. That requires moving beyond fear.
Okay, great. That's a perfect line to end this very interesting interview. Give out your website, please, so people can check you out and check out your book.
Absolutely. You're welcome to look at my website. It's johnhagel.com. And I'm active on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, so you can connect with me in many different locations. Okay,
great. Well, thank you for coming on the show, John. It was nice meeting you, nice talking to you. Very interesting conversation. Best of luck.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, Production Supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show from the writing team of OE Tearmann. This is Olivia. So, hi, Olivia. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. So, you're the O in the OE, yeah?
Yeah. Nonir and I, E.S. Argentum is their professional name. They're the E in OE Tearmann. They and I started writing together around 2010, and by 2016 we had something that we were really excited to share with folks.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the origin of the OE Tearmann. I see that on your bio, but why don't you tell it?
Yeah, of course. So we actually met, ES and I, in an Irish language club. We both studied the Irish language, which is sometimes called Irish Gaelic. So when we realized that we wanted to write something more professionally together, we thought about going under various names, and ES is non-binary, and they were still choosing a name. So we didn't want to go with anything too concrete. And since we both spoke Irish, we said to each other, well, why don't we choose something that means what we want to write. And since a lot of our stories focus on supporting communities that are often marginalized and showing characters taking care of each other, we went with Tearmann, which is the Irish word for a sanctuary. It originally meant a safe harbor in bad storms. And it's come to mean anything from an orphanage to an old folks' home. So we anglicized that to Tearmann, and we've been using that ever since.
Oh, that's an interesting story. Okay.
Yeah.
How many books have you two written now?
Well, right now we have 5 out and a couple of short stories and a few anthologies. And yeah, the series is designed to be 8 books in the end.
Okay, I'm just looking at this now. The latest one is The Hands Were Given.
That is actually the first one in this series.
Oh, that's the first
The
one.
latest one is called Draw Dead. So it's the Aces High, Jokers Wild series. Book 1 is The Hands Were Given.
Okay. Well, tell us a little about the series.
Sure. The series revolves around a unit in a fight to return representative democracy to what used to be the United States of America. Book 1 starts in 2155. In this time, the old American government gridlocked into non-existence, and 7 corporations took over the running of the country. They run it for profit, and the day you're born, your parents have to sign a citizen contract with one of the 7 corporations, usually the one who paid for the hospital that you were born in. And they own you after that, essentially. You're indentured for service and for position. And there are people trying to fight to get loose of that system and bring back democracy. So the stories revolve around the wild cards, who are a reconnaissance and action unit in the Democratic State Force, which is a force designed to bring democracy back. And they break the mold in a lot of ways, and they're essentially a found family.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting... In my head, several movies just sort of flashed through while you were speaking.
Yeah, we get told that a lot. A couple of people have mentioned that it reminds them of Firefly for cyberpunk, which we always take as a huge compliment. What was really funny is that somebody compared the medical corporation, the corporation that owns the entire medical sector, as Gattaca, and I'd never seen the movie. And then I watched it and went, oh dear.
Well, I haven't seen that one either. Well, The Matrix was the first one that sort of came to my mind. And then there's another one which the title is slipping me, which I'm going to try to look up here right now. Well, I think it's pronounced Elysium.
Elysium.
The Matt Damon and Jodie Foster.
Yep.
Okay.
And Elysium is an old Greek word for the highermost heaven. So the perfect universe, utopia.
Right. Okay. Where Earth has sort of been destroyed and the rich people all move to that sort of space colony thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And we definitely play with a lot of those themes that we are afraid of. The difference we work with is that we pull a little more from things like Tank Girl, if anybody knows that classic pulpy craziness. It's the sense that, yeah, I see your broken world and I'm going to raise you the scrappy insistence that it can get better, and it will if we work for it. So each book builds on the successes of the previous in the series. Spoilers, things get better. And actually the series was inspired by 2016 and everything kind of hitting the proverbial windmill. And we said to ourselves, we're sick of this nihilism. Fine, we're going to start a series that starts in the darkest version of America we could imagine, and then we're going to show people how to get out of it through writing. So essentially, our job is to write our way out of dystopia and into something better.
Something better meaning?
A more representative, more inclusive, more egalitarian world, especially in the USA. In our story, we posited that America fell apart. Some other countries fell apart, but a lot of countries actually pulled it off, and they're doing better than the USA. And in fact, one of the little digs that we have are commercials that get aired around the world that are saying things like, please help hungry children in America. They did amazing things once.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What is your definition of democracy in this book? Because I think people, even on a realistic level, have some variances to that definition at this point. And I think we're seeing some of that division in this country now. But for the sake of your book and your writing, what is your image of democracy?
At the very basic level, it's dignity and autonomy. It's the right to say what you think and be heard. And of course, you can disagree, but to be treated as a human being and be respected when you speak. In the world that we've posited, the corporations put up fake little leave us your information websites, but they ignore the information. Or, leave us your complaints. That all gets completely ignored. And everyday people are pretty much told to shut up and sit down in small ways and in large ways. And the other thing is autonomy, getting to decide what direction your life is going in, what direction your skills belong in. A lot of people are forced by circumstances, even in today's world, to do things that they're not suited for, that don't meet their potential. And if they had the access to tools that allowed them to reach their full potential, we'd all be better off. Because not only would they be producing something for our society that would be really impressive, but they would be doing better. And therefore, it's the good old thing that if you can paint your house, your neighbor's property values go up. So not just democracy, but a healthier society where it's not about, I've got mine, screw you. But it's about, all right, how do we take care of everybody so everybody is doing okay?
I think the question of equity, which is something that people are talking about, and it's changed from equality, which was something that was used more when I was in school. But the term equity is interesting because, as you just said, people have different skill sets and people should be allowed to pursue their passion, whatever it is. And it's going to be different for everybody. So on the one hand, you've got people who are pursuing all sorts of different avenues in life. Mm-hmm. But ideally, they should all end up in the same place. So how do you do that? Because I don't have an answer for that question.
Yeah. Right now, we don't have the exact answer either, but we know where we're dreaming about. And I might refine that statement just a little bit. We all end up in different places, but they are all equally respected. One of the things that shows up in our books is that on each base, there are various positions, everything from the cook to the commander. But you need each one of them to be doing well in their job, because if the cook isn't watching supplies, well, you starve. If the hydroelectrics person who runs the maintenance of all of the environmental systems on the base, so exchange for the air, purifying the water, doesn't do their job right, you get listeria and you die, or you choke on carbon dioxide. So the point is, we all have different skills, but all those skills are needed. And when you don't have one of them doing right, you all suffer.
Well, that's true. But in order to achieve complete equity, at least in our current system, everybody would need to be paid the same, right?
I think they would need to be paid with with less of a gap between pay levels. So there will always be positions that are more intense, and we'll have more pay to compensate for that, unless we get to the Star Trek level where everybody does it for the prestige, and that could have its own problems. But if we cut down the pay wage gap, That's the main thing. I believe it's Norway, but I may be wrong in this. They say in their system, the highest paid person can only be paid 10 times as much as the lowest paid person. Over here, it can be up to 200 times. And that's where we have the real problem. Not complete parity, but balance in the system. And we've gone all out of balance. The other thing I would say is, I have to give a bit of a caveat. I'm originally a farm child, so I have a lot of vested interest here. And I'm a logging camp kid as well. I come from a little town in upper Wisconsin originally.
Oh, okay.
So I feel we need to bring back the dignity of work, the dignity of being a everyday person, because a lot of the problems we're seeing right now are mutual disdain around the country. So we need to bring back that idea that, hey, I want my plumber's kids to be doing all right because A, I'm a decent person, and B, when he is doing all right, he won't try to scam me when he works on my pipes.
Well, that's a good
Things
point.
like that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think as far as wage disparity, I think there's no better example than Amazon. And,
yes, agreed.
When you look at, okay, they came out with $15 an hour across the board, which was a step in the right direction. But for a lot of people, $15 an hour just isn't going to make it. You certainly can't raise a family in New York City on $15 an hour. And then yet
you can barely survive as a single. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. But then at the top of the food chain, you've got Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world, who blew past Bill Gates a long time ago and is, I think, worth at least twice what Gates is worth at this point.
Yes. And actually, he's a perfect example of the mutual disdain I was mentioning as well. Have you seen the joke going around that people are putting together a petition not to let him come back to Earth?
Yes, I have. I think that's funny.
Well,
I think that's funny.
When the inequality gets to that level, we inherently, as human beings, say, that's not right, that's not fair, something's wrong. Whether we can articulate it well or not, or where we put the blame, is all up to our conditions and our upbringing. But there's something deep down in us, being primates, who were designed to live in fairly small groups where we were fairly equal. There's a lot to be debated there, but we were designed for that. So when we see one person get to hoard that much, our instincts kick up, and that's, to be blunt, that's when the pitchforks come out.
Well,
that's when the bricks hit the windows.
Yeah.
We're not helping ourselves as a society, letting ourselves get that far out of balance. And it causes all kinds of problems, internal and external. So what we're pushing in these books is that, what we're positing in these books is that these corporate elites essentially entrenched themselves during an extreme upheaval of America. And they got their places by saying, oh, the government isn't helping you? We'll take care of you. Just sign this paper. We'll take care of you. And they essentially created what amounts to dynasties. So each corporation was owned by a founder and his family, and they've carried that forward since. So you've essentially ended up right back in the Gilded Age.
Exactly. Where the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, J.P. Morgan.
And actually, we draw a lot of the concepts from that time period. We've been really blessed to get a lot of compliments about how we built the world. And I always stress, we didn't actually make that much up. We drew it from history. It already happened. So, for example, there is a citizen standing score in the books. If you are late to work too many times, your manager can drop your score. If you don't go to church in one corporation where the founder was religious, that'll drop your score. And people think that sounds horrible, and it is. but we based it on something that Philip Pullman did, and we based it in what Equifax started out as.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of credit scoring. Not at all.
No,
but
this is why we pick on it.
yeah. I did want to ask you one more question, and then we got to kind of wind this down. On your bio and on the description for the book, the genre that's listed is queer cyberpunk epic. Now, I was always curious by that particular genre because it was my understanding that the term queer was rather derogatory. But it seems to be popping up all over the place in reference to books, in reference to screenplays. I've seen it. Is this, what's happened with that word?
It is a very nuanced and interesting question. I am of the millennial I'm of the millennial generation, and a lot of millennials prefer the term queer because it's an umbrella term that we can all use, where we don't have to spill out a gigantic label. It's a way to say, I am of a group that doesn't fit the heteronormative expectations, without spelling out a gigantic acronym as long as my arm. However, okay. I respect the fact that a lot of folks in the older generations had that thrown at them as a slur. So I usually start conversations in person by saying, under the rainbow or something like that. Or if I'm in more professional settings, I'll say LGBTQ+. But as you can hear in my voice, I'm working not to trip over it. So that's kind of why the word's being reclaimed and reconnected with by the younger generation. And it's going to take a lot of discussion. I honestly would love it if we had a short, simple word without baggage that we could all use, because the acronym is wonderful and inclusive. On the other hand, it's a tongue twister, and it's just asking for you to trip over it.
Well, that's true. Well, what about gay?
A lot of people aren't simply gay. I mean, I'm bisexual. So gay wouldn't cover it.
Okay. So gay is too specific, actually, at that point.
Yeah, gay is much too specific, because when I'm using queer, I could be referring from anything from a cis gay guy to a friend who is non-binary and aromantic. It just means not heteronormative.
What's aromantic? I've never heard of that.
Aromantic means that, and this is not my my orientation, so if I get it wrong, I apologize to anyone who's listening. It means that you don't experience romantic or sexual attraction, and you don't experience the draw towards it.
Oh, okay. That's an
we're all learning something every day.
The one I just discovered the other day was Sapiosexual.
I have heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, Sapio sexual.
Mm-hmm. And what I love is that we're living in a generation and a time period where we can start to ask ourselves, who am I really? Instead of saying, oh, I better do what I'm told, what I'm expected to get done. Because growing up, I grew up in a very big, very loud family, but you saw a lot of people in their 40s and 50s who were just miserable because they'd done everything that they were expected to do all their lives, and they're in their 50s and finding out that was never what I wanted.
Well, I can relate to that. I did the same thing, although I figured it out when I was 43, so better late than never.
That's rough.
Yeah, but, it was strange because I started out at 18 doing exactly what I wanted to do, and then switched paths, and for 20 years I was doing what I didn't want to be doing. And finally I just had enough, and I had to get out, and I completely changed my life. And
I hear you.
Now I'm happy. So
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I know we could have gone on this topic. It's a big topic, a lot to unpack there, but we do have to kind of wrap it up. Do you have a website for the book or a personal website that you want to give out?
Yeah, go ahead and go to oetearmann.com. That's TEARMANN. And you'll see a lot of stuff there. You can get all the books. We recommend buying from the list of indie stores that carry our work first, because the Zon has enough money, but our Amazon links are there too. And we also have a newsletter where we give out free short stories, and we have a weekly book review of other near future books. So lots of stuff to explore. And there's also a page with a little information on each of the characters in the Wildcards crew. So you can have fun poking through the personnel roster.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing. This was a nice conversation. And
yeah, thank you for your time.
Best of luck with the books. I hope they do well.